And I'm happy that we're ending with something very exciting and something looking actually to our century. Scott studied at Westminster College and Georgetown University and the John F. Kennedy School of Government, but he has repeatedly dipped his toe into Burma. He also has a lovely collection of Burma, I guess I could say Burmiana, because it's not only Burma, it's also lots of people who received Burma and transformed Burma. And he's with us here today because he's also a fan of the science fiction author Philip K. Dick, who's been influential on pop culture and in lots of ways. And Scott also has his fan club here today, and we're happy about that. So, with no further ado, let me introduce Scott Brown.
Thank you, Lucinda. First off, I would like to thank the Ritten family for their gracious hospitality in hosting this conference. I really appreciate you. And of course, Lucinda, Cecilia, and Claudia, thank you for being the organizers of this. I'm going to talk about how is Burma relevant today and the creative use of Burma's ideas by 20th century authors and the peculiar case of Philip K. Dick. I'll begin with a quote from Philip K. Dick. "I have encountered the demonic, insane, slaying, dark side of God and seen it contained by the bright, or logos, or rational, or wisdom side, i.e. in the dialectic. So this is a profound and absolutely very visual experience of the Godhead, exactly as Burma experienced it." Dick wrote this in his exegesis, which I'll talk a lot about today. It's a 2 million word personal journal of a revelatory experience that he had in 1974. But I'll start off with this. This is a graphic story of Philip K. Dick's revelatory experience that he had in 1974. He had a toothache, and he was getting medication from the pharmacist who was bringing medication to him for a toothache. He had an impacted wisdom tooth, and the pharmacist came with a pack of medicine for him, and she was wearing a necklace that had an ichthys symbol on it, a fish. And that's it right there. And then we have the religious experience of Philip K. Dick. He was dazzled with the sun's reflection on this ichthys symbol. And of course you see the ichthys symbol right on his forehead. And then this is the way Dick wrote it, is it has lines and then a dot in the center. And he uses this symbol throughout the exegesis. He's playing with this symbol really for the next 8 years. And of course the artist put the symbol right there in the middle of his forehead, kind of like the third eye or something. And then of course this is Philip K. Dick right here. He was born in 1928 and died in 1982. He loved wearing a cross, especially after his 1974 revelatory experience. And then, of course, here's another picture of Philip K. Dick. This is in the Philip K. Dick, or PKDS, Society newsletter. And he was a rather large man. I mean, he was about 6 foot tall, and lived most of his life in and around Orange County, California, which is where Disney World is, and very commercial center of the United States. So this year marks the 400th year since the resumption of writing by Jacob Böhme from his 7-year silent period and the anniversary of his work De Tribus Principis, or the 3 Principles of the Divine Essence. So, after 400 years, the question should be asked, how is Böhme relevant? Böhme's ideas have influenced many individuals over the centuries since his death. In some academic circles and into the present, where examples of the use of Böhme's ideas continue to exert an influence that is, if not concealed, largely not credited to him. Despite, or maybe because of the largely invisible presence, Böhme's ideas have spread into the modern era. This nearly invisible presence spurs a creative process that allows for Böhme to be rediscovered, reimagined, and reappropriated by those who are captured by his life, his ideas, and this singular example of revelatory experience for the early 17th century. Is it possible that Philip K. Dick managed to translate Böhmian ideas through the thin literary ghetto of pulp science fiction? Now that Dick's works have gained widespread notoriety since his death in 1982, has this popularity helped to spread Böhme's ideas? Has Böhme found a new relevance through the once maligned genre of science fiction? Is it possible that we are moving into a world where we are influenced by Böhme in new ways, even if his works are rarely ever read? And finally, why is Böhme used as a creative foundation for others to graft their ideas upon or to explore new areas of thought far beyond what Böhme considered? We will explore a few of these questions today. I plan to explore some lesser-known 20th century links to Böhme through the works of a wide range of notable novelists, including James Joyce, the Baptist minister and civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Pulitzer Prize-winning author Cormac McCarthy, and the incongruous and now immensely popular late science fiction author Philip K. Dick. But given the time constraints today, I will only discuss the work of Philip K. Dick. The example of Philip K. Dick and his creative use of Böhme's ideas, and even the nature of Dick's mystical experience itself, bears a striking resemblance to Böhme. Dick's later works, after his 1974 revelatory experience he dubbed 2374 to mark the dates February 2 and March 3, 1974, decidedly become influenced by Böhme. Böhme has been described as, quote, the most Dickian of mystics. What does this mean? Perhaps it means that Dick and Böhme both share common traits of prolific work, immense creativity, and also of inscrutability. I will use direct references to Böhme in Dick's later fiction works, his nonfiction speculative works, and excerpts from his 2 million word exegesis to examine Böhme's influence upon Dick. In 1982, Philip K. Dick, the science fiction writer, died of a stroke, all but unknown except by friends and cult fans of a prodigious body of work that includes 121 short stories and over 45 novels since his first work was published in 1952. What was found among Dick's papers that became evident in his later works was a profound revelatory experience Dick called 2374. What began as notes for his next novel became the endless speculation and theorizing that developed into the exegesis, where Dick left behind this 2 million word personal journal to attempt to describe and define and endlessly speculate upon the nature of this supernatural experience. Philip K. Dick lived in poverty and obscurity during most of his life, but with the release of the movie Blade Runner in 1982, based upon Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, he began a posthumous ascent to worldwide fame and notoriety. At a point that begins at Dick's death in 1982, and a few months later, with the cinematic release of Blade Runner, Dick began the inevitable rise from cult obscurity to mainstream literary figure. A steady stream of films influenced by Dick followed, like Total Recall, 1990, Screamers, 1995, Minority Report, 2000, Paycheck, 2003, A Scanner Darkly, 2006, The Adjustment Bureau, 2011, and the more recent remakes of Blade Runner in 2017 and Total Recall in 2012, not to mention the Amazon series The Man in the High Castle, a book for which Dick won the Hugo Award in 1963. This work envisions a world where the Axis powers won World War II and America has been divided between Nazi and Japanese-controlled sectors. How many people here have not heard of at least one of these movies that I've mentioned? And then, of course, I have up here the posters for the Blade Runner, the original 1982, Total Recall, and then, of course, the remake of Blade Runner. And then this is the first edition dust jacket of Dick's first work, or the one he won the Hugo Award for, The Man in the High Castle. And this is the Amazon photo for the Amazon series that's still airing. Philip K. Dick's life began to reach a crisis point by the early 1970s. His life was marked by financial hardship, an inability to break into mainstream public fiction and out of the ghetto of pulp science fiction. He had amphetamine and drug use that ended mostly by 1972, a 1973 suicide attempt, and his own questioning of his sanity for most of his life. Dick did not have the luxury of writer's block. He wrote to live and support his family. Yet he was called by Ursula Le Guin, a science fiction contemporary, quote, our homegrown Borges. And Frederick Jameson pronounced Dick, quote, the Shakespeare of science fiction. And the author and illustrator Art Spiegelman said of Dick, quote, what Franz Kafka was to the first half of the 20th century, Philip K. Dick is to the second half. Dick was not without faults, however. He was married 5 times, ambitious, humorous, self-destructive, charming, given to extreme mood swings, and seemed sometimes to treat acquaintances like family, yet seemed less a gift, but more like a curse. So what does Dick have to do with Böhme? It appears that Dick discovered Böhme after his 2374 experience, which he claims a, quote, salvific gnosis reordered his mind, recreated the world around him, and was the catalyzing event that led him to write his 2 million word exegesis. The important aspect of the exegesis is Dick attempts to explain this mystical experience intellectually and to understand it for himself. Philip K. Dick's last 5 works, A Scanner Darkly, Radio Free Albemuth, Valis, The Divine Invasion, and The Transmigration of Timothy Archer, all were finished after Dick's 2374 visionary experience. These works either contain direct references to Böhme or to his exegesis that he'd begun working on in mid-1974. So here we have some quotes. In the book Valis, the first bullet, Fat said, time does not exist. This is the great secret known to Apollonius of Tyana, Paul of Tarsus, Simon Magus, Paracelsus, Böhme, and Bruno. The universe is contracting into a unitary entity which is completing itself. And then in The Divine Invasion, Dick says, we engineered the American Revolution, Elias said, a group of us. We were friends of God at one time, and the Brothers of the Road rose across in 1615. I was Jacob Böhme, but you wouldn't know of him. And then in The Transmigration of Timothy Archer, the difficulty that dogma presents is that it strickens the creative spirit in man. Whitehead, Alfred North Whitehead, has given us the idea of God in process, and he is or was a major scientist. Process theology, it all goes back to Jacob Böhme and his no-yes deity, his dialectic deity anticipating Hegel. Böhme based that on Augustine, sic et non, you know. Thanks to Jonathan Lethem, we have a portion of Dick's exegesis now published in 2011 and earlier excerpts published in 1991. If you're interested to read it, the entire work, published and unpublished, is available through an online collaborative hosted by Pennsylvania State University. It's at zebrapedia.psu.edu. I have contributed to this collaboration for nearly 2 years and can attest in the sometimes challenging freehand Dick wrote. Yet the transcriber is often rewarded with a stream of strange ideas that seem to riff or branch off of one another with ease. Like Böhme's work, Dick's exegesis is repetitive, but it is also a fascinating exploration of a single individual's impossible effort to understand and describe through the written word a singular visionary experience on 2374 that changed Philip K. Dick's life forever. And I'll show you really quickly. Here's a handwriting example of the exegesis that's available online. You can't see it if you go to this website. You actually have to sign up to be a contributor, but you don't have to transcribe. You can then access the entire unpublished exegesis if you sign up at this website. But you can see Dick is using imagery. He's playing with the ichthys symbol down here, and he's writing very fast. I mean, Dick was known to be a prolific writer, and a lot of this was due to amphetamine use. So he was writing hours and hours and hours upon end, and so his writing becomes very difficult to read. Preceding the 2374 experience, Dick's 4th wife, Nancy, left him. His home was burglarized. He attempted suicide and had taken a 2.5-year hiatus from writing. Dick's life was in torment, and he, like Böhme, was looking for a way to break through the gates of hell that had formed in his life. After his last suicide attempt, Dick is wandering until his 2374 event, and perhaps his greatest work, in my opinion, A Scanner Darkly, is written during this time of crisis and anxiety. The strange part about the 2374 experience is in his letters at the time, Dick never mentions the shattering experience that he is enduring. He seems almost at a loss for words, and his entries during this time are commonplace and uninformative. Dick doesn't mention any aspect of his 2374 experience until April 14, 1974, when he first writes fellow science fiction author Ursula Le Guin about his, quote, recent religious experience. But after this experience, he dedicates the remaining 8 years of his life to explanations of this singular event. It has been suggested that Dick's process to create new competing theories in his exegesis was vital to his religious experience itself. And so began Dick's final monumental work to describe the visionary experience he compared to Böhme's revelatory insight in 1600, the exegesis. And here you've got the title page of the exegesis of this 2 million word personal journal, The Dialectic, God Against Satan and God's Final Victory Foretold and Shown, Philip K. Dick, and Exegesis, Apologia Pro Mea Vita. Apology for my life. What exactly was his visionary or mystical experience he labeled 2374? In 1980, Dick described 2374 as a, quote, a more sophisticated experience of the world. In other places, Dick describes 2374 as anamnesis, or loss of forgetfulness, where he was a secret Christian who was living in fear of the Roman government. This does not mean that Dick necessarily believed himself to be living in Roman times, but that the same dialectical struggle between light and darkness was being repeated throughout time until the end of the world. 2374 was also described by Dick as, quote, shaman experiences, supernatural experience, genuine theophany, and religious experience, unquote. Dick wrote to a friend that this experience could not be expressed in words, yet that is exactly what Dick attempted to do. The exegesis began in mid-1974 and continued another 8 years until Dick's death at the brink of stardom with the film release of the movie Blade Runner. Dick sought to understand himself and contextualize his life through his own science fiction works. If to question one's sanity means that you are not insane, then Philip K. Dick was not insane. His penchant for questioning his own mental condition are well documented in his exegesis, along with thousands of pages of speculations, revelations, and strange tales of a precarious enlightenment. The exegesis includes strange annotations of his science fiction works and the ideas he struggled with in life and worked to resolve in his fictional worlds. Parenthetically, one of those is that Dick dealt with from the very first work he published to the very end was, what does it mean to be human? What are the qualities that it takes to be a human? And then he used artificial intelligence or machines to compare that to what a true, real human response would be. He also talked about other things like the idios cosmos, or the private world, versus the koinos cosmos, or the shared world. Because we all in our own heads are in our private world, and then we have a shared world that we operate in as well. But he was fascinated with the interplay between the idios versus the koinos cosmos. The exegesis includes strange annotations of his science fiction works and the ideas of, many of his ideas have yet to be fully investigated. For example, Dick reread his earliest published works and analyzed them in the context of this 2374 experience. So in a sense, Dick was looking into the past for clues to the future. One could argue that Dick's worldview has, in a sense, become our own as technology continues to change human interaction at its most basic level. For example, the idea that we are living in a computer simulation has actually been endorsed by some in the scientific community. Through the written word, Dick confronted existential problems and those in the world with a rigor and exacting obsession that is perhaps without comparison. Dick was compelled by the obsessive need to write. After his 1974 visionary experience, Dick wrote mainly to explain and understand his revelation with his rational mind. And here I'll give you some quotes that are in the exegesis that you might find interesting. I certainly did. To me, the world order, as it was for Böhme, is a reflection of a dialectical process of self-development in the ground of being, this process being a combat between mindless being and knowing. By bipolarizing these two basic aspects of itself, the Godhead evolves. We see this evolution mirrored in the intrinsically real, parent-derived world order, which holy wisdom makes real by subordinating it to, plus assimilating it with her own self as the cosmic Corpus Christi. And again, in the exegesis, Böhme plus I are both uneducated men. We did not come to our revolution by reading or education. I guess I express mine fully in Valis, his novel Valis. The irrational is at the root of creation, but reason, Saint Sophia, has broken into this irrational reality, plus transmutes, plus sobers it invisibly. So there is an evolution in the universe from the irrational to the rational. Böhme, yes, no. This is how a computer works. The zero position is the void. Hence, when I conceive of God as Valis. Now, Valis was a fictional work, and Valis stands for Vast Active Living Intelligent System. It's what Dick believed. Dick equated Valis with Christ, and he believed that this Valis, this vast active living intelligent system, was something that everyone would be included into at some point. So I conceive of God as Valis. I am only getting the one. I need also the void, the zero. To comprehend / apperceive / envision the void is to envision the other phase, zero phase of the flicker binary pulsation. So Dick talks a lot about this binary pulsation flicker. He believed the construct of everything that's created, of this reality, was like a 0-1 flicker. We were vacillating on and off between being and non-being every trillionth of a second. Really interesting stuff on how he's, using Böhme's ideas for his own and incorporating them into modern technology. So the sum of the two phases being the totality. Thus the Muslims are correct. The universe is destroyed every day, actually every trillionth of a second, and recreated. But what is interesting to me is the way I conceive of this. All its decisions, Valises, are made during the spaces that we are totally unaware of. So the one is changing or making an improvement during the non-being phase to try to make the next phase an improvement or progression. Really strange stuff. And then I am with Böhme perhaps most of all, plus with his teacher Paracelsus most of all, plus even with Heraclitus in his maxim, that latent form is the master of obvious form in my inner, outer, upper, lower, Christ versus Caesar system. And then the last one I'll share with you is, thought it would be nice since we're in Holland. It's the 16th and 17th century Illuminati are connected with this secret brotherhood of authentic Extians is his word for Christians, linked to the macro brain plus to Christ. This may be the same thing. The arcane symbolism plus cryptic tractates plus codices of the Hermetics plus Bruno, Theophrastus plus Böhme may conceal a supratemporal movement of political radical activists like the Freemasons versus Maria Theresa. They were crucial in breaking the power of the Catholic League in the 30 Years' War in its efforts to crush Protestantism. Without the Brotherhood in Holland, England, Germany, Protestantism would have gone the way of the Catharists instead of being the first heresy in 1600 years to survive. After his visionary experience, Dick began to use his work as a means to present aspects of this visionary experience and the ideas of Böhme. In 1978, Dick confessed in a letter to his daughter, quote, I am on one of the most important quests a human being can undertake. It is nothing less than updating the concept of divinity. Elsewhere, Dick said his purpose as a writer was to, quote, pierce through the veil of what is only apparently real and get to what is really real. unquote. Some have contended that Dick was no philosopher or theologian, but that is not how Dick saw himself, especially toward the latter half of his life after the 2374 supernatural experience. He states, quote, "I am a fictionalizing philosopher. The core of my writing is not art, but truth," unquote. And in the exegesis, Dick writes of his 2374 experience where, quote, "All illusion dissolved away like a soap bubble, and I saw reality at last. And in the 4.5 years since, have at last comprehended it intellectually, what I saw and knew and experienced, my exegesis." There is some disagreement whether Dick pursued his 2374 experience analytically and intellectually and did not try to spur another experience like his original experience in 1974. Dick echoes Böhme unknowingly when he says that he wants to capture what cannot be spoken with words, yet both authors ignored their own warnings and continued to write. For Dick, to update the concept of divinity through science fiction may not be as strange as it may seem. Böhme said that a person of any religious affiliation could find Christ, which was and continues to be an astounding statement. So, if we are to believe Philip K. Dick, then could his work be an attempt to give a new revelation through science fiction? That question cannot be conclusively answered here, but Dick's greatest strength was to ask questions. He questioned everything, often questioning his own sanity in the process. And it is through these questions that he found Böhme. And so I took this off the exegesis, or off the Zebrapedia website that contains the exegesis. It's a really interesting graphic. This oval in the center is Jacob Böhme, and it ties together in visual form all the other words that are used in conjunction with the word Böhme. So you've got, and the closer into the center, the more the words have been used in conjunction with Böhme. So you've got Paracelsus over the oval. So he's linking Paracelsus and Böhme. Ubik, which is another of Philip K. Dick's fictional works, is mentioned a lot with the word Jacob Böhme. A.N. Whitehead, Alfred North Whitehead, is also used. Giordano Bruno, Maze of Death was another one of Dick's fictional works. The word Gnostic is also used a lot. Jesus, Logos, Plato, Valis, the book Valis, God, Hegel, and then of course on the outside there's a lot more words as well, but these subjects are kind of conveniently put together in a visual format. Dick's nonfiction work, Cosmogony and Cosmology, is a standalone essay that is the summary of the exegesis after Dick discovered Böhme. Böhme is mentioned several times in this work as a basis for Dick's striking and creative reinterpretation of Böhme's cosmogony as a foundation for his own. It is interesting to note that Cosmogony and Cosmology, where Böhme figures prominently, was written on January 23rd, 1978. At roughly the same time, Dick confessed, quote, "God answered my prayers by leading me to Jacob Böhme." It is important to note that Cosmogony and Cosmology is a distillation or summation of Dick's ideas and questions posed in the exegesis at the time it was collected. It is in this essay where Dick attempts to reinterpret and reimagine Böhme's ideas on the nature of creation as an, quote, updating of divinity, which Dick claimed was one of his objectives in his work, both fiction and nonfiction. Folder 50 of the exegesis was written in January 1978, so I estimate Dick first encountered Böhme through his new editions of either the Encyclopedia Britannica or the Encyclopedia of Philosophy sometime during or in the preceding year before January 1978. Cosmogony and Cosmology postulates a world that is a, quote, projected framework being projected by a computer-like teaching machine that Dick called artifact. The artifact is ruthlessly deterministic and operates on blind cause and effect laws to render this world as a prison against an experience of the Ungrund, or abyss. This artifact has created this world as a mirror or instrument for the first creator, or Ungrund, to comprehend and attain self-awareness of itself. Dick states, quote, "We are moving toward isomorphism, or similarity with, the Ungrund, and when this isomorphic state is reached, the individual, quote, bonds to the Ungrund in a stunning flash of light that Dick likened to Böhme's blitz, or schrack. The flash, or schrack, acts as a door through which the light world of the Ungrund can be reached. For Dick, the goal of human life and striving was to be isomorphic with the true maker, the Ungrund. Andrew Weeks points out that in 6 Theosophic Points, the Schrack, quote, is the shock of human self-recognition and the tragic ground of life. Yet it also stands for the wisdom of Sophia. And it is in the 6 Theosophic Points where Böhme seems to replace Christ with the nothing or abyssal God. It uses Böhme's ideas of the Ungrund in a similar way to how Böhme uses it in 6 Theosophic Points, almost as a surrogate for Christ, for the word Christ. But Dick goes further to state, quote, Christ is a microform of the Ungrund, not a product of it, but it itself. The Ungrund, or abyss, assumes a renewed importance in Böhme's later works, and also for Dick. Dick believes that humans closely approximate isomorphism to the Ungrund, and so this Ungrund can be born in a human being. In Cosmogony and Cosmology, Dick asserts that Christ, or the Atman, derived from Hindu philosophy, is a microform of the Ungrund, or primal God. And once this Ungrund is born in a human being, the moment of blitz, or lightning flash, occurs and the power of the world is broken. Dick emphasized that we should not deny this world, but should work toward the, quote, moment our individual egos die and the Ungrund is born in us. At this moment, we are freed from the world and become a portion of our original source, unquote. In The Meaning of the Creative Act, Nicholas Berdyaev writes, the final human mystery is the birth of God and man. And Dick also is trying to solve this mystery between man and God, as well as to describe his own visionary experience using Böhme's idea of the Ungrund. It is perhaps in Dick's Cosmogony and Cosmology that he most closely parallels Böhme's ideas on how the universe was created. He states, quote, the maker is motivated to seek an instrument for self-awareness, and our reality was constructed as a mirror or image of its maker, so the maker can thereby obtain an objective standpoint to comprehend its own self. This Böhmean idea is expressed in the Dictionary of Philosophy edition that Dick owned, where it states, quote, the abysmal will needs a real object to arouse self-knowledge. The dialectical process of the Ungrund to reach self-awareness occupies much of Dick's thought and is covered extensively in the exegesis. Dick was interested in Gnostic thought, but his artifact is no demiurge, but an unconscious machine-like projection that has no evil will in itself. Dick's idea bears some relation to Böhme's spiritus mundi, or spirit of the world. It is important to note, however, that Dick was not influenced just by Böhme, but by a long list of thinkers from the pre-Socratic philosophers up through thinkers through the 20th century. Dick builds upon this, quote, world as computer system analogy using ideas from Böhme that are written about at length in both Cosmogony and Cosmology and in the larger exegesis. Böhme writes in his 177 Theosophic Questions, quote, all things consist in ja and nein, in yes and no. Dick proposed that the Ungrund perpetually interacts with the world or artifact in a binary manner similar to a computer system where 0 and 1 form the basis of all computer processes. And you saw that quote earlier from the exegesis that mentions that. For Dick, the computer was an ideal analog of how the process of divinity in the world operates. In a speech presented in Metz, France in 1977, Dick states bluntly, quote, we are living in a computer-programmed reality. Similarly, in the 6 Theosophic Points, Böhme comments on the unreality of the world, stating it is, quote, nothing else than a coagulated smoke from the eternal ether. In Dick's works, the 1 represents the Ungrund, or yes, or ja, and the 0 represents the artifact, void, or non-being, or the no. Böhme describes this dialectic between God and what Dick calls Valis, this vast, active, living intelligence system, or being and non-being as occurring within every single moment of time. Dick states, quote, the initial false move, it, Valis in brackets, tries out during its 0 phase is Böhme's no, and the 1 or on phase is Böhme's yes. Dick referred to this idea as his, quote, binary 0-1 switching model. Dick equates Böhme's yes and no with the computer's binary processing, but also to describe the world itself in terms of a computer system. This dialectic process creates the world. Again, in the exegesis, Dick states, quote, now this correlates with Böhme's conception of evil, that evil is the no stages in God, which are ultimately rejected by a higher synthesis, unquote. Dick dwells on the binary nature of reality as a binary 0-1 pulse flicker. That's what he called it, a pulse flicker. And the, quote, foundation of the world is to choose, to reject, to choose again. Böhme's dialectic ceaselessly at work, blinking on, off, on, off. This binary dialectic process swings between being, the one, and non-being, the zero, every trillionth of a second. And during the void or zero phase, the Ungrund chooses or discards a choice in favor of a better next step in the dialectic process. This binary process is the fundamental construct of creation itself, as well as the goal of human life, a choice between light and darkness. Near the end of Dick's life on April 15, 1981, he writes about a sleep insight where he states, quote, his envisioning is essentially Böhme's updated in terms of computer and information processing systems. The fascinating thing for me is Dick, the exegesis is filled with a multitude of ideas, but Dick is still working with Böhme's ideas at the end of his life after he had discovered Böhme years before. So he doesn't put him down. He keeps working with Böhme's ideas. So to conclude, I will return to the original question posed at the beginning of this paper. How is Böhme relevant today? The scientist Georg Christoph Lichtenberg is known for commenting that Böhme's works were, quote, a kind of picnic where the author provides the words and the reader the meaning. However, another quote by Lichtenberg may best describe Böhme and Dick and their drive to explain the unseen complexity behind the world. Lichtenberg states, quote, do we laugh at Jacob Böhme? But the supernatural things of which he speaks could never sound natural. Do we not already have in our religion 1 times 3 equals 1? Böhme and Dick both ask their readers to suppress their rational minds and strike out beyond the obvious and what is known. This is part of a creative process that Böhme and later Dick and many others have used as foundations for their own creative expressions. The life and works of Böhme captured the creative imagination of followers since his death. Through the intervening 400 years, he has become a foundational thinker for creative expressions of all kinds. And in the case of Dick, the attempt to use Böhme's ideas as a means to update the concept of divinity in the 20th century. Could an obscure science fiction author be a modern access point for Böhme? It seems possible that Böhme continues to reach out through us through the centuries in subtle and profound ways of which we are mostly unaware. Did Böhme seek to do the same for those he wrote for? In the fiction novel Valis, Dick writes of ideas set forth in the exegesis, quote, I suppose all the secrets of the universe lay in it somewhere amid the rubble. Should we find it at all ironic that Böhme claimed a similar revelation? It seems that Böhme finds relevance for individuals who use his life and ideas as a means or catalyst for their own creative expression. Perhaps that is how Böhme is most relevant today.